because I've told people if they don't make it, they can come and join us later with the recording. So here we go. Happiness in lockdown. Now, I wasn't sure for a while about whether to call this happiness or whether to call it managing stress or, looking after our mental health and well-being. But actually, as some of you have heard already, someone I did a talk for about 2 weeks ago decided to call it happiness and to call me the happiness coach, which I haven't gone by for a year or two, but she decided to call it that. So I had to then sort of retitle it. But actually the concept went down pretty well. And then I think the idea of still looking for happiness, even in these difficult times, is an important one. So we've stuck with the theme and hopefully you'll agree it'll be useful at the end of this. So just how happy are we all right now? And these stats are even pre-COVID. So this is the situation that we've been in as a UK, if you like, for quite a while. So the NHS reports that psychological problems, including anxiety and depression, are behind at least 1 in 5 visits to the GP. Now, it could be that number is actually higher, because if you think about it, many people will go to their GP, but they might be going with a physical symptom. So they might be going with something like backache or neck ache or feeling sick or not being able to sleep. So it may not, for quite some time, if ever, actually be diagnosed as something that is stress, anxiety or depression related. So I think the stats are probably higher than that in any event. Stress is the cause of at least almost 50% of work absence, and again, that is just cases where stress has actually been put down as the root cause, whereas actually there could be many other instances that it is stress related. So new cases of work-related stress, depression and anxiety are being diagnosed in the UK at least every 2 minutes. And again, it is potentially the figures are even higher if people are not actually presenting at their GP with what they're calling stress. And that was obviously, as I say, before COVID-19. So what other issues are we facing now? We're all obviously remote working from home, or the vast majority of us are, unless of course key workers, or as of, was it this week, last week, those who need to go back into work can do, but the majority of us are still working from home, which is something that we're not used to. Not even those of us who work from home a lot, we're not used to 100% working from home. So we've got this sense of isolation from our teams, from our workmates, even if we're just used to going to school to drop the children off, there's that isolation from the other parents and our friends and all those sorts of things. And of course, fear and anxiety about the future, about our health, about our loved ones. We're worried about our loved ones who may be high risk categories, etc. Then we've got some added pressures as well. Some people are very, very busy. Their workload is full on at this time, and they're working really long hours. Some people conversely are too quiet. So because of obviously the downturn in the economy and everything that's going on, they're too quiet. Now, isn't it the case that we're never happy? If we're too busy, then we're stressed out. And if we're too quiet, we're worried, because what does that mean for the future? So of course we're, both of those issues are a worry. And then of course, many of us are managing kids at home, or we're managing being at home with our other half, which we may never have been, for any great period of time before. And then of course, we've got the finances to worry about, the economy, all those sorts of things, and the future. What does the future hold? What does it look like? I mean, even the immediate future right now, in terms of how are we going to come out of lockdown and how is that going to be? So there's a lot on our minds at the moment. As I say, even before COVID, our mental health and well-being was not particularly good. And these are sort of issues on top as well. So today I really want to talk to you about some strategies for increasing our happiness. So this is me. If you don't know me, I know I probably know the vast majority of you, I think, but I have got some new people, which is fantastic. So I'm Hannah Beko. I'm a commercial property lawyer, have been for about 14 or 15 years, I think. So I still have my legal business. I'm self-employed. I've been self-employed for 8 years now. But because it's my own business, I was able to set up Authentically Speaking nearly 4 years ago now, actually. And that is a speaking, coaching and training business that I set up very much because I understood what chronic stress felt like, and of course it still rears its head. I mean, especially in these times, but it got really debilitating for me. So I think it was the end of 2015, where, you know, I'd got my legal business, I'd built it over the previous 3 years, it was doing really well, you know, far better than I'd ever expected. We had a new house, we had new cars, my husband had been promoted. You know, on the face of it, everything was fantastic. You know, I had, if you like, ticked every single box, you know, for my life. I was 35 and I ticked all the boxes. But actually then I started to think, well, okay, I've ticked all the boxes, but why don't I feel very happy? You know, shouldn't I feel really happy about the fact that I've ticked all these boxes? Because I did believe at that point that happiness was achieving a set of goals, if you like, ticking a set of boxes, because that's what I suppose I believed all my life about my career. You know, get the grades you need at school, get into your career, progress in your career, buy the house, have the family, buy the cars, you know, and I guess I did think that there was some happiness at the end of that particular rainbow, but actually realised that there wasn't, that it was something more than that, and that's what today's session is going to be about. So I did train as well as a coach and as a corporate trainer, sort of by accident really in a lot of ways, because I went to lots of retreats and trainings and joined masterminds and things like that, to help with my legal business and to help me with the sort of mental load of dealing with that business and things. But actually along the way decided that I really wanted to share what I was learning with other people, because I just really enjoyed it. When I ran my first workshop about, it was 3.5 years ago, it's one of my favorite things to do. So I am very much missing the in-person trainings and workshops at the moment. So of course these are the very next best thing. So I have got 3 boys. You can see them there. Teddy is 10, Rufus is 6, and Victor is 2.5. So I do know what the sort of daily juggle is like, especially at the moment with homeschooling and running the business and all that sort of thing. So that's just a brief introduction to me. So happiness. Our circumstances only affect 10% of our happiness. Now, I found this really interesting when I came across this research about 3 or 4 years ago when I was writing my first workshop. So this book is The How of Happiness by an American psychologist. And she was asked to find out if we can do anything to make ourselves happy. You know, can it be outside of our external circumstances that there are things we can do to make ourselves happy? And I'm sure you'll be really pleased to hear that her research was, yes, there are things we can do to make ourselves happy. And I'm very much going to be sharing some of those tips with you in today's session. But what I wanted to point out here, because sort of following on from my story and how I got into all this, was the fact that I believed happiness was at the end of this set of tick boxes, if you like. You know, if I'd achieved all these things with my life, then there would be happiness there. You know, and we can often either catch ourselves or hear other people say, I'll be happy when, or I'll be content when, or I'll feel peaceful when, you know, and it's always waiting for something else to happen. But actually her research shows that only 10% of our happiness relates to those external things. And what she means by circumstances is things like whether we're wealthy or not, whether we're married or not, whether we're healthy or not, whether we have children or not. You know, all those things are just external circumstances that only affect 10% of our happiness. So I suppose I found it quite illuminating that we can spend so much of our lives trying to affect this particular area, but it only affects 10% of happiness. And I'm sure you can sort of relate that it can be very temporary as well. You know, you might buy the new house and then within 6 months or a year, if not less, you're starting to think, oh, what's the next thing? You know, so we're always sort of on the look for the next thing, if you like. So what is our biggest threat to happiness? Now, this is just my opinion, but my opinion, and why I started off talking about stress at the beginning, is that one of the biggest threats to us feeling happy is the high levels of stress and anxiety that we're all facing a lot of the time. So I wanted you to have a look out for any of these symptoms in your own life or with those around you. So if you ever notice that you're having trouble sleeping, so getting to sleep at night, if you notice that you're waking up in the middle of the night, so sort of 2 to 3 a.m. was my time, I would wake up every night and I would be running over things in my mind. What had I forgotten to do? What did I need to do? I was almost mentally running through my caseload to see what I'd forgotten or what I needed to do for at least an hour or so every night, almost like clockwork. So that's something to look out for. If you feel you're struggling with focus and concentration, which used to be there for you. You know, you used to find it quite easy to focus and concentrate, but actually you're starting to struggle with it a bit. If your memory isn't as good as it was, that's a really interesting one. That's something to look out for. If you find that you're eating too much, so we're comfort eating, or eating too little, you know, working so hard or feeling so anxious that you're not making time to eat at all, you know, that's a danger sign as well. Or drinking too much, of course, you know, all these are symptoms of perhaps too much stress going on. And then this is a favorite one of mine, although not something we're likely to see a lot of at the moment because of lockdown, but if silly little things keep happening, like you get a speeding ticket in a 30-mile-an-hour area right outside your house that you drive through every day normally, but you're just not paying enough attention and go through it at 34, 35. That is certainly something that was on my list of things that was happening a few years ago. And minor bumps in the car, you know, if you reverse into stationary objects 3 times in a year like I did, then for me it was certainly a sign that I was going too quickly at everything. I wasn't paying attention, you know, and I needed to sort of slow down a little bit. That was certainly what that was saying to me. So those are the sort of symptoms of stress that I want you to be on the lookout for, either in yourself or in others. But what I always find is useful for people is to explain to them what stress is actually doing to our bodies and why you will notice some of those symptoms that I just mentioned to you there. So this diagram is, if you like, what happens in the brain when we experience stress. So in the days when, you know, stress was a healthy and good thing for us, is sort of you'll have heard it talked about a lot, the fight or flight response that our body produces if we're in danger. So in the cave people days, you know, the threat would be the lion or the tiger or the attacking tribe or whatever, and we would need to run or we would need to fight. So what our body would do is it would release adrenaline, it would release the stress hormone cortisol, and cortisol would then increase our blood pressure, increase the flow of blood to our extremities, so our feet and our arms, so we could run or we could fight. But what it would do is it would take away energy, if you like, from the prefrontal cortex part of our brain, which is our rational thinking part, our decision-making part of our brain. So what it would also do is it increases the fear and anxiety part of the brain. If you haven't heard this about the brain is making new neural connections all the time, so you can actually increase the size of different parts of the brain by increasing the number of neural connections. So when we're suffering from chronic stress, the neural connections in the fear and anxiety part of the brain actually increase. So we're increasing the size of that part of the brain. And unfortunately, we're decreasing the size of the learning, memory, and stress control function at the same time, and decreasing this decision-making part of our brain. So what this looks like nowadays is the sort of chronic stress reaction that many of us experience from time to time, where obviously it's not lions and tigers, but it could be emails or phone calls being constantly sort of in demand, and social media bombarding us, and all those sorts of things. Different stresses for different people, of course, in their lives. But what we see happening is the fear and anxiety center increasing, learning, memory, and stress control being decreased. And that's why I mentioned you might find it harder to retain information. You feel your memory's not as good as it was. And as I say, even rational thinking and rational thought becomes more difficult. So what this used to look like for me years ago was I'd just have a phone call or an email saying, Hannah, can you get in touch with me quickly? And I would immediately think that you know, I would catastrophize, if you like. So I would immediately think there was some disaster, I'd done something wrong, I was going to lose my job, and then I was going to lose my house, you know. And because I was going through this thought process so often, it became almost instantaneous. The minute I saw that phone call or that email saying contact me urgently, I went straight into panic mode and you know, went to worst case scenario, I've lost my job, I've lost my house. Whereas now that I've learned to reroute this, and I'm going to talk to you about how we do that shortly, now I would get a similar email saying, Hannah, I need to speak to you urgently. And I will look at the time and I will decide, have I got time to phone them right now, or have I got another meeting or appointment or whatever, in which case I'll phone them in an hour or two. You know, that is literally the thought process that I go through now versus what it used to be. So that's just a nice little description of what is happening in our brain when we get stressed. So what are our usual solutions to stress? What have we been doing, and what are we still doing to a large extent to reduce our stress and to increase our happiness? So we're doing things like yoga at lunchtime. We're doing things like, well, usually trying to go on holiday a few times a year. Clearly not obviously at the moment, but that's been one of our usual go-tos to sort of manage stress and increase happiness. Unhealthy, as I say, comfort eating type habits has been a go-to. And conversely, very healthy eating habits. So, obviously exercise is something that is recommended for stress, and I'm certainly not going to say that's wrong. I think it's one of the pillars. I think other things definitely need to be factored in as well. On its own, it's not enough. So, for example, I work with some coaching clients who will be in the gym at 6 a.m., most days of the week. So they're very healthy, if you like, in terms of their eating habits. They're very healthy in terms of their physical body because they're in the gym every day. But I did hear a wonderful quote that was something like, so you get all these stressed out people going to the gym a lot. So all you get is a lot of fit, depressed people. So, you can still have the mental health issues, the depression, the anxiety, everything else, even if you are going to the gym very regularly and eating healthy. So the next one, obviously antidepressants is one option, and alcohol has been a go-to for, certainly in our profession, in the legal profession, it's been a go-to, and still is for a lot of people as well in terms of dealing with stress and anxiety. So what can we do instead? Or, what can we add to things like the yoga and trying to eat better and trying to get exercise, etc. So just coming very quickly back to this diagram, this tip, the first tip I'm going to share with you, the reason I come back to this diagram is because it is such a simple tip that I don't want you to discount it straight away. I want you to understand how powerful it is and why I sort of put it at the top of my list, if you like, of anything when I'm working with anybody at all or giving any tips. It's the first thing I suggest. So this particular tip has the effect of reversing this stress reaction. So it decreases the fear and anxiety center in your brain, and it increases the learning, memory, and stress control function. And it also puts control back to that decision-making part of your brain. So in effect, it reverses this reaction. So it's really, really good and really, really powerful, but it's so simple, and that's meditation. So what are some of the sort of upsides for it, apart from, as I say, reducing the stress reaction? It can certainly help you sleep. So it'll help you get to sleep better at night, whether you do your meditation at night or not, regardless. It will help you get to sleep better at night. It will help you sleep through. So I stopped the sort of 2 to 3 a.m. wake ups once I was meditating regularly. It does help with focus, concentration, decision making, even confidence. I can't really over exaggerate just what a difference regular meditation can make. So what do I mean by regular? If you really want to see a big difference in your life, then you want to be doing about 10 minutes a day. Now, for some people, they might already be doing that, or that might be, something that they can put into place quite easily. Now, for others, I know it's not so easy. Some people don't get on well with meditation historically, or they've tried it and they don't like it, or they find that what's been recommended doesn't work for them. So what I want to say to everybody is, if it's something that historically you've not got on well with, then do give it another chance, and feel free to have a chat with me at some point about it, because there are so many different ways to make this work in your life. Some people will not do the sitting or lying down. They need to move, so they can have more of a dynamic or a moving meditation. Some people love the apps, so they love Headspace or Calm. I personally don't think they're necessary. I think they can overcomplicate it a little bit and give people sort of too much to get their head around before they even get to the meditation bit. So I'm a big fan of keeping it really, really simple. So my biggest suggestions are, if you use YouTube, you can just type in guided meditation for, and you'll find guided meditation for sleep, for insomnia, for stress, for happiness, for success. I'm sure there's probably even one now about dealing with COVID, etc. So you just type into YouTube guided meditation for and find one that you like, and then try and make a point of listening to that for 10 minutes every day. And you can work up to the 10 minutes. So if you've not sat and done it for 10 minutes in one go before, it's going to be very difficult. So do 2-3 minutes one day, 5 minutes another, and work up to it. The way that I prefer and that I've used for the last 4 or 5 years is just having one thought. So like a positive mantra, if you like. So it works in 2 ways. It works because you're meditating, and it works because you've got this positive mantra that you're repeating. So you could use something like, I am calm, I am peaceful, I am happy, I am successful, I am confident. You know, I always say whatever you want to feel that day. You know, you wake up in the morning and you think, actually, I do feel a bit anxious, so all I want to feel is calm or peaceful. Then use one of those. If you think, actually, I've got something on today that I want it to go really well, then use I am successful or I am confident. So whatever you need that day, that's the thought you want to use. And then what you do, you can either just sit in silence and do this, or if, like me, you've got a fairly noisy house with dogs and kids and things, I will again just go onto YouTube and just find meditation music. So just any background music without a voice, so it doesn't disturb my thought process, if you like, and just put my headphones in with that background music on, and then I will just repeat my thought. So I am calm, or I am peaceful, whatever it is. Keep repeating that thought in my head for 10 minutes. Now, of course, your thoughts are gonna wander off. That's what the brain does, and that's when people think they're doing it wrong, but they're not. That's what the brain should do. But you want to bring it back. Where as soon as you realize that you've gone off to thinking about what you're having for tea, or the email you need to send, or the letter you need to post, or the bill you need to pay, you know, as soon as you realize you've gone off, just come back to your thought. I am calm, I am peaceful, whatever it is. And with practice, you will go off less, so you'll be distracted less. And as soon as you are distracted, you'll realize more quickly and come back to your thought. So the reason I think this works personally is that if you think of our brain as being like a motor, so like a Hoover or a hairdryer or whatever, if you left that running all the time, eventually that motor would burn out. And this is what we're doing to our brains. So they're running 100 miles an hour all the time, you know, even at night, obviously, and that's why we're waking up in the middle of the night and running over things in our heads. So this sort of forcing your brain down one thought, down one path, is giving it that rest. And that's why, you know, it can be so powerful with dealing with, you know, anxiety, stress, depression, and just everyday confidence and resilience and all those sorts of things. It is a really powerful, not just for helping you out of a bad situation, but almost a protection against things happening. It does really help build your resilience for the bad days, if you have this as a regular practice. So I'm sure you could probably tell just how enthusiastic I am about it, but I would encourage everyone to give it a go if it's not something that they're familiar with. So why the 10 minutes? I did a clinical trial a few years ago, which is how I made it into my daily habit, because I had to sign up to do it for 6 weeks. So I did this clinical trial and we measured our wellbeing levels at the beginning of the trial and 6 weeks later, and we were asked to do 10 minutes a day. And I think that does make a massive difference. Within about 4 weeks or so of doing it regularly, it will make a big difference in your life. As I mentioned, with the sleep, with the confidence, with the decision making, with focus, with memory, with just feeling calmer. It will help with all those things. But incidentally, the clinical research that I was part of, there was, as I say, they measured our wellbeing levels, and I'm sure you can imagine that everybody's wellbeing levels increased over the 6 weeks. But somebody was diagnosed with cancer partway through that trial, and their wellbeing level was still higher at the end. So it really does show how it does help with resilience and helping you deal with all the things that come up in life. So let's move on to the next one, or I could talk about that all day. So how to become more present, which I know is a bit of a buzzword, but actually just, you know, whether you're with your loved ones, your children, even talking to people, you know, that you work with or whatever, how can you be more present to what they're actually saying to you, rather than sort of back in our heads again, you know, thinking about what we need to do, what we've forgotten, what's coming next, you know, actually be more present with the people that we're with, but also be calmer and to start seeing the positives more often. So how can we do that? And that is to have a practice of gratitude, which you've probably heard mentioned before. Another reason I like it, and I always go back to the science, is that it can have a physical impact on the heart. So there was a study done of people who had heart disease, and half of them were sent off to just come back in 6 weeks' time, and the other half were sent off to keep a gratitude journal every night and come back in 6 weeks' time. And those that had kept the gratitude journal every night were less likely to progress from heart disease to heart failure. So it had a physical impact on the health of their heart. So that is the science reason behind why I like gratitude. There's many reasons I like it personally, because it does really help you to try and see the positive sides of situations, which, you know, in the tough times we really need. So again, with everything, I always say keep it really, really simple. So each evening, just think of 3 things that you're grateful for. Now, I differ to some other people because I say make these specific to that day. So I know you're grateful for your family and the roof over your head and the food in your cupboards, but I don't want those. I want something specific from that day. So maybe it's that you've caught up with a friend you haven't seen for ages. Maybe something you've been working on has finally finished, or, you know, whatever it is specific to that day for you. Maybe it's that the warm weather came back. Apparently tomorrow is going to be the hottest day of the year, by the way. But yeah, so it could be that. For me, tomorrow night, that might be it. But yeah, think of things that are specific to that day. And then my favorite question I always get here is, well, what about on the bad days? What about on the days when I can't find anything? And those are the really powerful days. That's when this really comes into its own, if you like, because you've got to really look for them. And it could be something like the cup of tea I had this morning, or the fact that it's bedtime and my bed is comfortable. You know, it could just be little things like that. So then you can write them down if you want to keep a diary. You can speak them out loud if you're there with somebody else, or you just think them to yourself before you fall asleep. It's that simple. It's a great thing to do with children as well. So my last couple of tips. Tip 3 is avoid comparisonitis. You know, particularly at the moment, these last 2 tips are more sort of COVID related. I'm seeing a lot of people who are falling into this trap of, you know, I'm seeing on social media the cakes people are baking, the artworks they're creating, the languages they're learning, the instruments they're taking up, you know, all these things. And if that is you, then absolutely fantastic. But if you're not one of those people, don't feel the need that you should have done something like that, or that somehow you've, you know, missed out because you haven't. You know, it's one of the worst things we can do for ourselves is to compare ourselves to others. And my next tip is to carve out some time to be on our own. Now, this is important for men and women, actually, because we are, you know, isolating with our families and things. It is important to make sure we just have some time on our own, whether that is 10 minutes to do your meditation, whether it's half an hour to go for a walk or ride your bike or go for a run or read a book, you know, whatever it is that's your thing. Do make sure that you're trying to make some time for yourself to just be on your own with your own thoughts. I think that's really important, and that's come up a lot the last couple of weeks for people. So just the last couple of thoughts for me. Happiness is a choice. You know, it's not something we need to wait for, or we need to say, when this happens, I'll be happy. When that happens, I'll be happy. It's something that we do have control over. So as I mentioned, I was going to come back to this research. So our circumstances only affect 10% of our happiness. 50% of our happiness is a genetic predisposition, so we are born with it. So there's nothing we can do about that 50%. And I did have a particularly sort of unhappy person at one workshop a year or 2 ago who said, well, if I can't do anything about 50%, what's the point? And I said, well, okay, fine, that's one way to look at it, but 40% is under our control, and 40% is still a pretty high figure. So if we can improve things by 40%, then I think we're doing pretty well. So what is this 40%? The 40% is due to intentional daily activity. So it's stuff that we can do on our own, doesn't need to cost any money, doesn't need to involve anybody else. It is just something we can do on our own. So it's things like gratitude I mentioned, meditation I mentioned, things like journaling, writing, keeping a diary, all those sorts of things. But the main 2 I would mention are gratitude and meditation here, because it's having a sense that, I think the research in the book says, it's having a sense that life is good and having a sense of seeing the positives, you know, which is what gratitude is really good for. So this, that's what makes up our happiness. And as I say, the 40% is completely under our control. So why is happiness important, apart from the obvious reasons that, you know, it feels better? We build higher quality relationships if we're happy. Happiness is I hate to use this word at the moment, but happiness is contagious. You know, if we are happy, then it goes to those people around us. Productivity is also increased by at least 12% if we are happy. We're increasingly engaged with our work, and we provide a superior customer service, which is always a good thing. Happy people, so those who experience positive emotions, joy, satisfaction, contentment, and enthusiasm, are more likely to have successful careers. And people who are happier apparently have higher incomes later in life. And then a few of the main ones for me: we are role models for those around us, whether they be our children, whether they be the team that we work with, whether we lead brownies or scouts or church groups or whatever. We are role models to people. And so if they see us trying to take these steps to increase the happiness in our lives, then hopefully some of that will rub off onto them. Happiness also increases resilience and confidence. So resilience isn't a word I'm a fan of because of the way it can sometimes be used. Oh, we've given you resilience training, so don't complain now and don't go off sick with stress and things. But as I mentioned about meditation and all the tools I've mentioned today, they do help us to deal with the bad times even better. That's what those sorts of tools do. So if you would like a positive quote for the day, every day for a month, into your inbox, do feel free to visit my website, which is authenticallyspeaking.co.uk. That says .com there. I don't know why it does. That needs changing. It's .co.uk. And you can sign up there and get a quote a day for a month, just sort of positive, hopefully happy quotes there. Do stay in touch. I would love to know what you thought about this session afterwards, so I will send you a very tiny little feedback form that I'd really be glad to hear your thoughts. And I'm going to stop sharing now, and do let me know what questions you have got. Let me stop recording as well, so we're not recording anybody.